Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, and crazy good martinis today, really. I think you can almost say they're all three good martinis. For conservatives today, Jim, we know that tonight we're getting a double dose of special speeches. The president from the Oval Office for the very first time will be explaining why he's insisting on the funding for the border wall, the demands on our border patrol, and the threats that exist at our southern border if we don't take border security more seriously. The networks hemmed and hawed about whether they wanted to run this because they're supposedly worried about a lot of factual inaccuracies. In the end, they're going to, but they're also going to take a rebuttal, which is usually only seen at the State of the Union, but Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are going to do a response. So we'll talk about all of that here as we get going here, but two good things basically to kick off here. Number one, that instead of just tweets and the occasional off-the-cuff soundbite, President Trump is actually going to have his staff put together a coherent argument for why this is a critical issue, why it's worth putting his foot down now when, obviously, with the government shutdown, as we mentioned yesterday, in certain areas of the government, it's creating some pain for folks, why this is a critical issue. And ultimately, it's good that the networks are doing this, although it's not good that they even considered not doing it. So what do you make of what we saw on this issue in the last 24 hours?
Sure. Multiple good news on this front. The first is I think this is probably almost a little bit of an overdue move on the part of the president. The Oval Office address in prime time is probably one of the most effective tools in the communication arsenal, particularly if you don't overuse it. And this is something the president should be doing. Also, later apparently tomorrow, he'll be heading off to the border, speaking in front of places where there is a border wall. I think one of the things that's been frustrating over the first 2 years of Trump's presidency is that the argument about the border wall or border fence or border barriers, or however you want to characterize it, has turned into a proxy fight over Trump. And if you like Trump, you like the border fence. If you don't like Trump, you don't like it. And Trump needs to expand beyond his base and to basically say, look, put aside what you think about me. Listen to the guys who are in charge of Customs and Border Patrol. Listen to these Border Patrol officers. They're the ones who are out there. They're the ones whose job is to stop people from coming across the border. Let them describe what they see and what they experience. The dangers of smugglers, the dangers of cartels. We all remember the Fast and Furious and the use of American-made guns to kill Border Patrol officer Brian Terry. This is what the reality is. And they make an argument, or at least the head of the Border Patrol Officers Union made an argument before Congress that basically said, look, we don't need the Great Wall of China from the Pacific to the Gulf of Mexico. We need a couple 100 miles worth of fencing because can that stop everyone? No. Of course, an 18-foot fence, yes, they can theoretically find a 19-foot ladder or something like that. But what it does is it acts as a funnel. It narrows down the areas where people who are trying to cross the border are going to go to, and that makes it easier for the Border Patrol to catch them. This is a very compelling argument to me. I think it's a very compelling argument put forth before the American people. I don't think it's inherently xenophobic. And I think Nancy Pelosi, who will be giving, along with Chuck Schumer, the response tonight, will come across very ineffectively, and I think probably extreme if she comes out and says, as she said the last couple times in the last couple of days, a wall is an immorality, that the wall is immoral. We already have existing border fence in a whole bunch of places. Would she like to tear it all down? Does she believe that those walls are immoral as well? In a better world, we wouldn't have to choose between just Trump's plan and the Democrats offering none. But this may be where we are. This may be a situation of America, you go with Trump's plan to secure the border, or you go with the Democratic vision, which is effectively no border security. My suspicion is that will not be terribly popular, and I think it's an argument the president can win. But he's got to be disciplined about this, and he's got to focus on this, and he can't just go off on streams of consciousness and making claims that 4,000 terrorists have been caught coming across the border. Facts matter, despite what the new congresswoman from New York thinks. And that's something we needs to be emphasized here. I think it's good. And also regarding the televising of the president's address. Look, listeners to this podcast know I got a lot of problems with President Trump, but he is the president of the United States. And this is the first time in almost 2 years of his presidency he's done something like this. The networks have to. The understanding is that the remarks tonight could be as short as 8 or 9 minutes. Networks, you only got to give up a half hour. That's really not asking too much. Now, I suppose you could argue, well, on January 29th is the State of the Union and all that stuff. Look, he has not made any of the requests of you for the past 2 years. You guys can afford this. Now, if you include the Democratic response, maybe it goes into an hour. But look, this is not something that seems like an unreasonable request of the networks. This is part of your duty to the country. The president needs to address the people. You're going to do it. I do wonder, though, Greg, in a world where everybody's streaming and watching on Netflix, do you get the viewership you used to? This may not be quite the effective tool that it used to be, but I'm glad the networks are doing it. The rumors that they weren't going to do it suggested, just sheer partisan bias to me. President Obama did this plenty of times. I saw one writer for Vox who was complaining that, well, back in 2014, the networks turned down a request from the Obama administration when they wanted to talk about immigration. Yeah, but Greg, at that point, he'd addressed the country in prime time, 9, 10, 11 times, something like that. So at that point, I think the networks, it's fair for them to say, hey, you've been doing this a lot lately. We're not going to do it. You're going to be stuck with the cable news networks.
Two quick follow-ups here, and following up on two things you mentioned. First of all, Trump, you mentioned this has become basically a proxy over Trump. If you like Trump, you like the idea of the border wall, at least a lot of people. And if you don't like Trump, then you're naturally inclined not to like it. So given the fact that Trump's the one making the pitch here, how effective, how many minds do you think can be changed by this?
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, if he makes anything factually wrong, people are going to jump up and down over that. And they should. The president should be speaking about these things accurately. Like I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, I pointed to this testimony of this head of the union for these Border Patrol officers. Again, you don't have to like Trump to see the need for how a border fence could be useful. And I'm glad the president is emphasizing how they're going to have steel slats and not look, Trump oversold this on the campaign trail. He said Mexico's going to pay for it. Now he's making the claim, because we renegotiated NAFTA, Mexico's technically paying for it. It did not do him good to overstate it, over-exaggerate it on the campaign trail. That doesn't change the fact that this would still be helpful for keeping people out of this country who do not have permission to get into this country. And it seems like a good course of action. We'll see how things shake out. I do wonder if the pressure from the government shutdown will eventually build more on Democrats than on Republicans. As it is now, we're at a stalemate. So, look, it's good to see the president at least changing up his strategy to persuade the public and move the numbers on this.
Yeah, and not that I'm complaining on this last point, but why Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer? I realize they're the leaders, but anyone who's watched Nancy Pelosi at a briefing anytime in the last decade knows she might not be the most effective communicator. What do you think?
Oh, no. And this is, look, good luck, Democrats. You kind of wonder how many folks, how many members of Congress from border states, how many members of Congress from border districts, how many members of Congress who are rising stars might look at this and say, hey, I can make a better argument against the president than these guys can. But you know what? You want to go with Schumer and Pelosi, Democrats? Go right ahead. Good luck to you.
All right, let's move on to our second good martini here. And, Jim, it was all the way back in December. In fact, it was the day of our last regular podcast, so we never really got to talk about Jim Mattis resigning as defense secretary. Kind of a big story there, just a couple days before Christmas. And the reason we think that he did so is because of the president saying that he was pulling the U.S. out of Syria because we had defeated ISIS. In fact, he said, quote, this is the president, our boys, our young women, our men, they're all coming back, and they're coming back now. We won because we had defeated ISIS. Well, that didn't obviously sit well with a lot of folks in the national security realm, including Mattis, and we wondered how it would sit with National Security Advisor John Bolton, and now we know. Policy seems to be changing here. Washington Post, White House National Security Advisor John Bolton on Sunday outlined conditions for a U.S. troop departure from Syria that appeared to contradict President Trump's insistence less than a month ago that the withdrawal would be immediate and without conditions. Speaking during a visit to Israel, Bolton said certain objectives must be achieved before a pullout could take place. The timetable, he says, flows from the policy decisions that we need to implement. Quote, it's also very important that as we discuss with members of the coalition and other countries that have an interest, like Israel and Turkey, that we expect that those who have fought with us in Syria, particularly the Kurds, not be put in jeopardy by the withdrawal. Bolton's planning to be in Ankara today. He did not get a meeting with President Erdogan, who is not very happy with this shift in policy, which is also usually good news when Erdogan's not happy. NBC News, in a speech to Parliament, Erdogan said that Bolton had made a serious mistake in calling for a new condition for the U.S. exit from Syria. He said, Bolton, that Turkey would – Erdogan said that Turkey would never compromise on the issue of the YPG Kurdish militia, which the U.S. has backed in the fight against the Islamic State in Syria. Now, get these two tweets from the speech today, Jim. See if you can figure out the loophole here. Here's Erdogan. Those who cast aspersions on Turkey by claiming that it will massacre the Kurds in Syria are actually well aware of the facts behind the issue. They aim to influence the international community and the decisions of those who are not quite familiar with the situation in Syria. Second tweet. Nowhere does Turkey go with the aim of eliminating any community or innocent people. Wherever it goes, Turkey's sole aim is to protect lives and ensure security. The only exception is terrorist organizations and terrorists. And oh, by the way, they consider the Kurdish militia a terrorist organization. So, Jim, nice try there by Erdogan, but good to see the United States sticking up for one of our most trusted allies in the fight against radical Islam.
Yeah, and by the way, it's worth noting here that we all remember Trump's statement. We all remember the reaction of Mattis. We all remember why so many folks who handle national security were unnerved by the statement. The idea that this precipitate, you could do a drawdown over a gradual period of time, depending on conditions, but the immediate withdrawal could have very serious and bad consequences. Well, little noticed in December 30th or so, Lindsey Graham says, I learned a lot from President Trump about our efforts in Syria that was reassuring. Trump made his announcement December 19th. He then went off to Baghdad to spend the holidays with the troops. He's been, meeting with various other folks, and it sounds like there's been some movement in the president's, position. Not a wholesale, 180-degree change, but he understands that you need the right conditions for a withdrawal. So that's what Bolton went out and said. So, by the way, this comes from, Fred Fleitz has a good article on this on National Review Online. He's the former chief of staff to Bolton back when Bolton was, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, knows him very well. And he says, look, Bolton isn't going to freelance, and Bolton's not going to come out and contradict the president and, describe the policies he wishes were in place. Bolton gives his assessment, and then, apparently it sounds like he has kind of won over the president to at least a more condition-based withdrawal rather than an artificial timetable. No wonder Erdogan is PO'd. Erdogan seemed to have planted this seed in Trump's mind during a phone call. I'm sure the president felt like he was kind of calling Erdogan's bluff and saying, you guys are tired of what we're doing over there? Fine. You fix it all. Without recognizing that, Turkey's solution for what's going on is going to look very different from what is the solution that is optimal for United States interests. But look, first of all, I think, snubbing Bolton is not going to help Erdogan in his effort to improve and affect U.S. policy. I think, if anything, that's probably going to irritate Trump. The only person in the whole wide world that Donald Trump believes is allowed to snub and insult and degrade John Bolton is President Trump, Greg. Who do you think you are, Erdogan? That's President Trump's job. My seeking suspicion is that whatever warmer feelings there were between Erdogan and Trump are going to sour pretty quickly here. And look, it's very, very clear. The interest of Turkey in Syria is to smash the Kurds as much as possible. And then, fight ISIS. Obviously they're fine with Assad's regime staying in place. Their interests are not our interests. And I don't know how much how much longer you can paper this over.
All right, let's move on to our crazy good martini now, Jim. And the good news is that Corey Stewart is going away, at least from a political standpoint. Corey Stewart ran for Senate last year. Unfortunately, he won the Republican nomination. He was thoroughly thrashed by Tim Kaine, as everyone expected. There was a much better Republican candidate in the race in Delegate Nick Freitas, much more conservative, much more principled, much better background. Corey Stewart also ran for governor and darn near beat Ed Gillespie for the Republican nomination in 2017. And that was before Charlottesville. I can't imagine if Corey Stewart had been the nominee for that. Corey Stewart decided that one of his big calling cards in running for statewide office was going to be defending Confederate monuments, which we have talked about before, and we think they should stay as long as they're explained in the right context. But Corey Stewart really embraced the Confederacy, was very murky in how he handled Charlottesville, to put it mildly. And now he's decided that he probably can't even win re-election in his local race. Washington Post, Corey A. Stewart, the Republican firebrand whose fights to crack down on illegal immigration and preserve Confederate monuments reflected the nation's increasingly polarized political landscape as calling it quits after 15 years on the Prince William Board of County Supervisors. In an interview, Stewart, 50, said he would not seek a fourth term as board chair this year and is leaving politics for the foreseeable future to focus on his international trade law practice and the business ambitions of his wife, Maria. Citing his 16-point loss to Tim Kaine in the November election, where Virginia Republicans also lost 3 U.S. House seats, Stewart said his departure from state politics will last, quote, until and unless the Commonwealth is ready for my views on things, and that's not right now, clearly. So props to Corey Stewart for knowing what he can and can't accomplish in Virginia. I'm sure he wants to make more money. Prince William County is changing quickly. I know that. I live there. It's getting deeper and deeper blue, so he was going to get thrashed if he ran again this year anyway, so that's part of the calculation. But, Jim, we are not going to miss Corey Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose we should give him a little credit for walking away, having recognized that Virginia does not like him, does not like his philosophy, does not agree with his positions. Maybe it's the simplest way, but he does not agree with his priorities. I've never seen a statewide candidate run so adamantly on the Confederate statue issue as if that was the preeminent issue on the minds of most Virginia voters. It just wasn't, and he got smacked around pretty badly, Greg, by that whirling dervish of raw political charisma, Tim Kaine, who I periodically need to remind people was Hillary Clinton's running mate. And when I say that, I'm saying it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it's really easy to forget that, oh yeah, he debated Mike Pence, that guy, the one with the eyebrow that keeps going up. And he got thrashed by him. And the whole point was, you could tell he was going to lose. I could tell he was going to lose. Our Alexander DeSanctis wrote a great piece. Look, we'd love to write a story in which Corey Stewart is a absolute phenomenon and popular, and this is I got disagreements with him, but it gives me no joy to say the Republican Party nominated a dud who comes across as a kook, who's obsessed with the Confederacy rising again, and who's completely out of touch with the average, suburban middle-class family that make up a huge chunk of the suburbs in Northern Virginia. Prince William County, as you talked about, Fairfax County, where I live. Look, whether you like what this changing demographics of Virginia or you don't, this is the state you've chosen to run in. You can't run in the state that used to exist 1 decade ago or 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago. You got to be realistic about that. And Corey Stewart never was. And he's kind of, you just wait and see. I'll show you. And he goes out there, and the polls were never close. This was never a, if one or two, ball had bounced a different way, things would. No, Corey Stewart never had a chance. And that's what really irks us. And I could have used much worse words there, Greg. Tim Kaine should have had a serious campaign last time. He should have been challenged. He is not a whirling dervish of raw political charisma. And if you had put forth a non-crazy option, and by the way, there were non-crazy options. Some of this is on Republican primary voters. But the previous year, look, if he had run against in the governor's race, I don't think he would have done any better than he did this year in the Senate race. Corey Stewart is just not electable statewide. I salute him for finally recognizing that. It's frustrating that it took this past cycle to learn that lesson. And I hope the party learns something and recognizes, look, love Ed Gillespie, hate Ed Gillespie, came very close against Mark Warner back in 2014. Yeah, he got thrashed in 2017 in the governor's race. I think that was a reflection of the Trump effect, particularly in Northern Virginia. Bob McDonnell absolutely clobbered Democrats a couple cycles ago, back when, in fact, I believe he won Fairfax County. Look, there's a type of Republican that can get elected statewide, and there's a type of Republican that can't, and the Republican Party will not win again until primary voters recognize this fact.
And Corey Stewart raised my property taxes. And he was big government in a lot of other ways as well. So the idea that he was this rock-ribbed conservative just simply wasn't true. But in a bigger picture, this reminds us of one of the great things and one of the frustrating things about living in Virginia. Every year is an election year here because in addition to the local races, we have state House and state Senate races this year. And, of course, 2017, we had state House and statewide office like governor, attorney general, and so forth. And so then we get the midterms and the presidential years. We never get a break in Virginia. We're not complaining. We're just explaining. And two other things from this Washington Post piece real quick. One, I think most people can probably sympathize with. He cited other reasons for deciding to get out of politics as well, familiar to any politician. Lack of sleep, unwanted weight from unhealthful roadside meals, and too much time away from family. Politics sucks, Stewart said. On a personal level, it's been a disaster. And then one other nugget here, which reminds me of what you said just a few days ago about people who are interested in actually doing the job. I think it's when you were talking about Scott Walker and actually doing the job as opposed to wanting to be famous. As far as the Prince William County Board job goes, he said, dealing with land use cases in the county budget just isn't exciting for me anymore. So, Jim, it's almost like it was a platform for other stuff.
By the way, his warning about, not just the weight gain, but personal finances and exhaustion and all that kind of stuff. Like every millionaire, billionaire, celebrity who says, I think I'll run for office. But that's exactly the voice they use, by the way. For some reason, their voice goes up a few. Like, I want Corey Stewart to just show up at their door and say, here's why you don't want to do it. Just hey, you know what? Public office has work involved. And in fact, it's got a lot of hard work involved. It's a long, hard slog. The appreciation can be minuscule or nil. It stinks, but it's kind of supposed to, right? Because it's a responsibility. Some might even say it's a burden, right? The burden of command. We don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry stepping into these jobs. And when I say we don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry stepping into these jobs, Greg, I mean every Tom Daschle, Dick Gephardt, and Harry Reid. So yeah, I mean, politics stinks. Amen. Your other point, though, Greg, about how we get an election every single year here in Virginia. Look, there's a lot of great products of this state: ham, shipbuilding, tobacco, going back to that. But really, primarily, we're an election-based economy. Basically, what do? We elect people. That's what we do every year, in and out.
Our negative ad skills can be put to good use if people are willing to scratch out the checks, as we've proven just recently.
You think about, people think, it's these inside the Beltway elitists. People don't realize how hard people work down in the western and southern parts of the state in the attack ad mines. These things don't just happen. You have to go down into the ground. And how do you think they get the gravel for the gravelly voiced announcers and all those blurry black and white photos of candidates? That just doesn't happen. You didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, bye, Felicia. Jim, Corey Stewart's gone, and we're not going to miss him. Let's hope the Republican gets elected down there in Prince William. Jim, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.